Yeah, that's fine.
Now let me put my coat on. 1 second.
You may want to come in the notifications. How do you sleep those?
I think those are from Mari, but we'll all be on mute.
Oh, okay. You think it's Mari's? Okay.
Yeah.
And this is Victoria. I don't know if you want to move me to an attendee. I guess I got a panelist link. My apologies.
No worries. You can stay muted, and then during the webinar, it'll just be Julissa and the mayor.
Okay, perfect.
That'll be with you.
Okay.
And good morning, everyone. I see some participants already coming in. We'll be with you very shortly. So hang on tight. We'll be right with you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Maestro Center's Let's Talk Small Business Recovery session with our mayor, Ron Nirenberg and Julissa Carielo. Before we start, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Mari Zavala. I'm the executive director for the Maestro Entrepreneur Center, and we're super excited to have you here today and to have this session to talk about our small business recovery. But before we start, I wanted to thank our mayor, Ron Nirenberg, for the amazing work he has done to help and support the small business, and for always supporting the Maestro Entrepreneur Center's effort and always being there through the tough times, the good times and the tough times as well, to support our small business community. And also I want to thank Julissa Carielo, our board president and founder of the Maestro Center, for taking the time to be here today, and for also all her support and everything she does to support the small business community. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce our mayor, Ron Newenberg, and Julissa Carielo, which will share with you some insights about the small business arena and the recovery in our city. So without further ado, welcome both. Thank you for joining us. We're super excited for this session this morning.
Good morning.
Morning. Thank you, Mari, for that and for hosting this session, right? Mayor, what I will tell you is that we are super excited to be having this talk with you today. We received numerous calls and emails from the small business community, excited that you are going to be listening today and participating. We know that you care about us. We know that you're out there doing what you can. And, you know, we just want you to know that we want to be part of that solution. And so we want to be part of, you know, what we're going to be planning. We also want to be part of establishing the road back to recovery, right? What I want to start with today is, first, I want to, you know, take us back a little bit about, you know, what happened over a year ago. We were talking about, you know, we identified that we had two main crises going on in our city, and really everywhere, right? But specifically what we can do, we talk about what we can do together, right? And that was the two major crises. We knew we had the health crisis with the pandemic, and then we also knew we had the economic crisis that was being affected because of this pandemic. During that time, you know, we were blessed that we saw you collaborate immediately with other, you know, community stakeholders, and mainly the main thing that we saw was the collaboration with the two government agencies for the city and the county, which that was a huge thing, because we thought they really came together, they're working together, and this is going to make it even more impactful if we're on the same page and we're all tackling the same issue, right?
And, you know, I do want to thank you for your leadership, because that is really where you had to really bring them in and say, hey, we're all going to do this together. And you stayed with us every single day. I mean, we saw you giving us input and updates, and that was something that really calmed the consumer confidence. It calmed the, you know, what we were thinking, right? But today, what I really want to focus on is, you know, what happened to the business community during that period, and what were some of the things that, you know, we really need to look at to help us get the business community back to recovery. Now, we also know that because there's vaccinations, the business community is super excited. They're thinking we gotta get back on track, right? We all got to do the things that we love to do, and we got to do it now. And so you're seeing so many innovation going on at this moment, because the business community is moving. They're not waiting for anybody. They're getting out there. And so some of the things that I want us to talk about before anything is, I want to first explain what I'm going to be covering today is really what we talk about the recovery for small businesses. I'm not going to talk about large business, because there's so much more control of what they're doing. A lot of them are still affected. Everybody's affected, but what I want to focus on is really the small business side. But before I do that, I want to explain really just to share a little bit of how we work with the small business community here at the Maestro Center, right? Because I think it's important. You know, what we do is we review the small business based on the stage they're in. From startup, you know, these are the businesses that are starting up. They're establishing their product or service. They're getting out there. Most of the time is 1 to 2 years. They're looking for access to capital to launch. It's a very different need that's needed there until they get to the next phase, where they go into emerging. The emerging business will be there normally from 2 to 5 years if they get capacity building. If they don't, they will be at that level 10, 15 years. And really what happens is the businesses go into more of a survival stage. They're learning to survive. They're also learning their product or service. They're learning what their consumer will buy. And they're learning to price things, and they're learning it by trial and error most of the time, because they don't have the right capacity programs to help them. Now, we also know that the small business startups, this happens nationwide. This is not just a San Antonio issue. This is happening nationwide, right? So we know that 50% of those startup businesses will go out of business in 5 years. So grabbing as early as possible those emerging companies to give them capacity building so they go beyond that 5 years is important. Now, but during the pandemic, what we saw is that those businesses were going out in less than 5 months. It was going very quickly. They were going down. And so that was something that we thought, what do we do? We can't really do anything, but it's happening. Now, the other thing that we saw was that after an emerging company establishes themselves, once they go into the level of, you know, they're doing better, they know how much revenue is coming in, they know their profit, they're able to start building a little bit at a time, they start going into the second stage companies. Now, the second stage companies are very critical, because these companies are the ones that are going to do the most impact in our economy. They can create the biggest job growth because they're ready. All they really need is utilization. They need to be able to get utilized so that create impact a lot quicker, right? And so when we do capacity building, we are doing it at different levels, almost like a university, right? They're freshmen, they're sophomores, juniors, and seniors until they graduate to large. We also know that the small businesses nationwide stay small. They do not grow. We know that there's obstacles that's preventing them from growing, and it's the way business is done normally, right? And so for us to look at that is something that needs to be, you know, how do we change the norm of how business is done, how banking is done, how lending is done? All those things are affecting why the small businesses are not growing. But going back to the pandemic, regardless of the size of the business, everybody was affected, right? But I want to address in 2 categories. So what we're saying is if the small business lost revenue by 25%, if their sales reduce by 25%, that group of companies are going to be a lot easier to recover, because a little bit of grant relief, a little bit of any type of support that can be given will get those companies moving quickly. The businesses that were shut down or had a major impact because they were not being able to be open, if they had 50% or more of losses in sales, those companies are going to have a harder time to recover. The reason those companies have a harder time is because those companies are more established. They have fixed costs that they've already had established. So in order for them to run lean, they are acquiring debt every single month they're opened. And even if they shut down, they minimize that debt, but they still will have a longer time for recovery. And what we're seeing for recovery is could be 3 to almost 5 years. So providing additional assistance for those companies is going to be very critical, because we know it's like you can't just disappear the debt because you open the store and people are coming in. We still have to address that the companies are going to be carrying going forward. And so with that, I want to start getting into my questions, right? Because I think that it's important that we hear from you, Mayor, as to what your thinking is out there, right? And so help me, support us. I'm sorry, explain to us what your support is for getting our businesses back on track.
Yeah, well, first of all, let me just say thank you, Julissa, and to the leadership of Maestro for what you do every day and for the invitation to appear on the panel here. Prior to the pandemic, we knew how important, centers and services were directly for small businesses, particularly startups. And that has been laid bare, the importance of that during the pandemic as well. So thank you for your attention to this and for inviting me. So let's talk about some of our immediate approach to small business recovery. The city certainly understands the value of our small businesses as the backbone of our economy and the great majority of the employment base here in San Antonio. So as part of our COVID-19 recovery and resiliency program, when we were establishing the priorities of how we were going to get through this unprecedented time, we allocated a significant portion of our recovery funds to small business relief services and grants. $42.7 million in grants, programs, and services to help them survive initially. With that funding, just in terms of scale, we were able to provide grants for over 1,100 micro businesses, as well as 68 nonprofits. And we also utilized some of those funds to forgive 56 small business loans that were acquiring debt. So in addition to that, what we were able to allocate last year, and that was the figure from last year in February, when this pandemic first began, as you know, we set up structures of government in collaboration with the county because we knew we would have much more force and impact if we would work together. We established structures that would allow us to work nimbly as more resources became available, either through the local level or state or federal. And also as needs arose, we could pivot and work quickly and not have to wait for the bureaucracy to catch up. So in February, we approved an additional $14 million specifically for the hard-hit hospitality sector. And it was targeted at restaurants and bars, bringing our combined effort during the pandemic to roughly $22 million for the hospitality sector in terms of small business resources and grants, particularly because for about a month they were totally shut down outside of curbside and things like that. Until the state took over the opening and closing process in April of 2020. We're currently reviewing applications for additional funds that are available, and we expect awards to be issued by the end of June. We anticipate that funding will be providing relief to an additional 300 to 500 businesses. And as you mentioned, some businesses need a little bit more assistance, some their needs aren't as great. And so the grant awards are calibrated to the level of need of the businesses that are eligible. So in moving forward, and obviously we know that the impacts to the economy, particularly in the small business community, are not just they don't end just because people get vaccinated. We also have resources that we're fortifying out in the community that I want to draw folks' attention to. And one of them, frankly, is partnership with Maestro. We've got to see that and continue to grow that. I'd also like to point out what's going on with the UTSA Small Business Development Center. The COVID Business Recovery Accelerator has business advisors on hand to assist with PPP loan applications and other recovery related questions that may assist businesses. This is especially important, noting that the PPP applications have now been extended by the federal government to May 31st. So if you have not already placed your application, are concerned about the federal process, have questions, but need help, please access that recovery accelerator, because that's exactly why they're there. Our own City of San Antonio Small Business Office also provides technical assistance and other resources. We don't want to see minor costs cause the downfall of small businesses. So we have fee waiver programs, for instance, that provide waivers on certain city and utility fees for those seeking to renovate spaces during the pandemic or after the pandemic to accommodate more customers or more space. There's also a loan interest buy down program for small businesses that we have in partnership with Lift Fund. They provide businesses zero interest loans, anywhere from $500 to $50,000. And those seeking to start a business as well as purchase property or equipment are encouraged to access that. Obviously, we understand the need for assistance continues, and we're going to continue monitoring opportunities as additional funding becomes available, which we expect it will. I'm very grateful that just to set expectations, we have not gotten any assistance, financial assistance for small businesses from the state government. We have gotten assistance from the federal government. And that's how we were able to kickstart things back in March. But we also expect in the new administration to have some significant small business resources made available through the American Recovery Program, the American Rescue Act, excuse me. The current projection is that the City of San Antonio will receive approximately $326 million. We're waiting for the rules and regulations regarding those funds. But there are specific funding revenue streams that we expect will be directed specifically at small businesses. I should note also that the city's not the only one receiving funds in the American Rescue Act. In terms of local communities, the county is as well. Those funds are significant. The suburban communities are also receiving funds because the threshold for relief has gone down in terms of population size. So we're anticipating significant resources from the federal government to be made available to help our small business community. And our focus now is to make sure that we unwind those rules and regulations, we understand them, and that we provide technical assistance for our small business community to access those funds from the federal government as well. The last thing I'll say, Julissa, and this is just broadly in terms of how do we help small businesses recover? It's to end this pandemic, make sure that folks can get their vaccines as quickly as possible. There's great news on that front that I'm happy to share. We'll go off on a tangent though if I do. I just want to tell you that we're working very hard, and I think Bexar County is standing out as a real performer in this space. And by doing that, we're also going to continue to build consumer confidence. So you can expect us to be very loud about the fact that, we're getting this pandemic put behind us. It's time to get back out there, live your life, take precautions, but also go enjoy the vast array of small businesses that we have here in San Antonio.
That's amazing. I'm happy to hear that relief is coming, right? And then it's going to be how are we going to utilize it, right? So one of the things that we did is we actually have been surveying the companies we're working with, and we are identifying a few things that the companies are saying, these are the number one things that we need help with, right? So the number one thing that we found was that they wanted to see a citywide buy local plan. This is where we're saying, make sure that every agency out there, every large business, even consumer, is buying from the local community. We also know that when we bring this up in the past, we go to the state, we go in where we're trying to say, change the laws to make it where we can buy more locally with public dollars, right? And what we always hear is, oh, no, that's, if they're higher, we can't use them. But the reality is that every dollar spent recirculates in the community from 7 times up to 19 times. And so keeping that money local is a really big thing. And so it's a missed opportunity every time that we don't do it. And so can you help explain, your plan for buy local?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And I agree 1000% with buy local initiatives. And frankly, as you stated, we need to be pushing our legislators to permit more local preference in terms of procurement and other opportunities for us to keep dollars local. So you will see us continue to be at the very edge of opportunity when it comes to ensuring that local dollars, especially public dollars, are kept in our community in terms of contracting, procurement, things like that. So I agree 100%. In support of the Maestro Center's Buy Local initiative, the city committed, as you know, $50,000 in FY 2020 and FY 2021 to help kickstart a new resource that highlights the goods and services provided by our local small business community. And we believe that by highlighting this initiative, it will encourage others, encourage other jurisdictions within our own Bexar County area to do the same. The goal obviously is to grow our local businesses and grow local spending that will retain those dollars locally, as you pointed out. That will also help our promote local businesses. It will also help increase employment opportunities. And I am proud of the work that you've done, Julissa, and your colleagues to help strengthen our local SBETA protocol, which is being held up as a model SBETA program. That goal obviously is to not just encourage growth in our small business and minority-owned business community, but it's also about local. So we will continue to do that. In FY 2020 alone, I want to point out that the city of San Antonio spent $219 million in local, small, minority, and women-owned businesses, which represented the majority of our city contractual services. That needs to go up. It was 54%. We need to increase that percentage. But it's still very impressive in terms of what we're able to retain locally. The city is also going to continue to team with the City Economic Development Department and Maestro to enhance the Buy Local Grow SA initiative and educate other businesses on doing business with the city, entering the Central Business Registry, Central Vendor Registry, etc. So you have probably overheard some of the conversations we've been having at council to ensure that as we're seeing responses to different procurement calls for procurement, that staff brings us back local. And we're doing that now at the city. We're doing it at SAWS and CPS. We're doing it everywhere we can as a recovery priority, in addition to, frankly, we want to grow our local community. So I'm very happy with the direction that we're moving, but we obviously have to keep our foot on the gas to make that happen.
I agree. And I love that you believe in this program, because it's so important, right? The buying local power, identifying the buying power in our community, where it's at, who's buying and where they're buying from is such a big thing, right? But I do want to mention that the SBETA program that the city launched, before it was utilized, you were having less than 10% of the small businesses being utilized. Now with the SBETA program, you have right at 50, if not a little bit more. The last numbers I saw were close to 50, which I thought amazing. But how do we expand that beyond the city purchasing power? Like, we need the other agencies to feel the responsibility for this community is part of their buying power too, right? Again, it's going to circulate and continue. And so how can we take that Sabeta process and raise it up above the agency so everybody has to follow it? For the small businesses, it's a huge deal. So finding a way, I don't know, we don't have the answer today, but at least we know, what we want to do, right? I do want to mention the Buy Local Grow SA initiative that the Maestro Center has. It's basically, and it was funded by the city and the county. So it was to develop a centralized website for the small businesses to register and start doing business to business, and also to let the large businesses and organizations be able to post opportunities directly so that they don't have to register 20 different locations. They go to one location and they're able to find stuff. It makes it super easy. There's resources there for grants and everything that's coming out that's available. It's in Buy Local and you can register for free. So make sure you do that if you haven't done that.
May I just add one other thing, Julissa, in terms of these big economic development projects that come to us and San Antonio's overall economic momentum. When we work with partners who want to plant a flag in San Antonio, we let them know that part of their responsibility is to help grow the local business community as well. So you're seeing tremendous partnership with companies like Navistar working with our local business community to actually make that development happen, not just hiring local, but also contracting local to build their projects. So it's a really great partnership. And as long as we have that mantra that quality lives in San Antonio and we want to stimulate it, I think we're going to continue to see that needle move.
That's amazing. Yeah, great. So I'm going to move to the next thing. So the next item that the businesses requested were small business grants related to specialized consulting. This is being able to work with CPAs directly and getting some relief for that. Knowing that a lot of them have PPP forgiveness to do, they have to take advantage of any payroll tax credits, anything that's available that is not normally what businesses know how to do, right? We need assistance for that. The other thing is paying for some of the technology upgrades so that we're raising the bar for our businesses to have that connectivity that they need, but also to be able to market and sell themselves in that same way, right? So assistance for marketing, assistance for operations, that kind of grants we need to be looking at. On the other coin, what we were seeing was that we know that we were doing rent relief programs for the residents, and what we wanted, the consideration is also rent relief programs for the businesses so they can stay in there longer or they can pay down the debt of past due rents, right? This is something that we need to be able to look at, and we don't need an answer. We're just really wanting to know what we're thinking, right? Do you have any response to any of that?
No, I agree. And in fact, when we were formulating the Recovery and Resiliency program and identifying the pillars of what that program should be back in March of 2020, identifying housing relief, food security, digital divide, small business recovery. When we were identifying those priorities, it was the small business recovery piece of this that we were focused on providing, exactly as you said in the opening, that in some cases, the ability for a business to remain in business is simply paying the utility bill, keeping the lights on, or being able to make the rent, providing to, on a regulatory side, making sure that protections that were being afforded to tenants were not just residential tenants, but were also business tenants, making sure that large conglomerates that were perhaps located in states far away from us were not adversely impacting our small business community. So what we did is that we focused on providing direct relief to the small business in terms of cash grants so that they could determine where the relief is needed most. And I mentioned that in the initial recovery, we allocated roughly $30 million to small business grants. We've focused in on some of the hard hit sectors, particularly hospitality, with an additional $14 million. And then when it comes to ongoing relief, we want to make sure that a big bill doesn't come due at all of a sudden. So the American Rescue plan, what we're going to be focused on is making sure that we unwind those rules and regulations and that we work with our Economic and Workforce Development Committee, which, Councilmember Villagran currently chairs it. Councilmember Rocha Garcia sits on it. Councilmember Pelaez, I believe Councilmember Gonzalez is on there as well. So what we're going to be doing is working through that committee to make sure that we're addressing those immediate concerns. The goal of the grants is to make them deployed or to allow them to be deployed and put into production for small business as quickly as possible to keep the lights on, keep the operations moving, and make sure that they are able to stay in business.
It's amazing. So the next item, number 3, is on the job training programs or incentives for hiring for small business. This is where we're addressing the needs of skilled and unskilled workforce, right? Right now, what we're seeing is that in retail, in restaurants, and construction, hospitality, we cannot find workers, right? The workers are happy staying home with unemployment benefits, and what we need is to bring them back somehow. And what we also need is to find that workforce, and whether we're building it from training from Haven for Hope, or we're doing a program with San Antonio Housing Authority, anywhere where we can grab those that are being unemployed to get them into work in some of these areas. And so I'm very curious to hear what your thoughts are on that side.
Yeah, and this is a big problem. As you know, I don't need to tell you that. It is a big problem, the lack of available workforce. And it's a particular problem in the midst of this pandemic. We know that from economists that many who have left the workforce may not come back. And that's an additional layer of a challenge. We also know that one of the best ways we can address the employment issue or the workforce issue is to end this pandemic as quickly as possible. We're focused on that, obviously. There is a headwind against us with some of the politicizing of the pandemic, but it's also the fact that there are vast resources available in terms of relief and unemployment benefit that in some cases are being utilized for folks who are concerned, scared about going back, or just don't want to go back. So there is a lot of complexity to this issue, but what I think we need to do, and beyond just simply ending this pandemic as quickly as possible, is that we've got to focus on the job training, where workers can come back to work immediately and train on the job. So that was one of the areas of focus. Thank you, Julissa, for our Train for Jobs program, which is underway, where we work directly with our local businesses, local small businesses to employ people. We provide them the resources to do so, and they're able to train the employee on the job to ultimately achieve not just having a job and a paycheck, but also to have a skill that they can take and use throughout their career. That is also going to be a feature of the Ready to Work program, which is currently being built, and the board has already been seated. So on-the-job training becomes one of those ways that we can provide for credentials, skills, marketable skills for employees to have economically mobile careers, but also address the immediate employment crisis. We obviously need partnership with employers and small businesses, local businesses, to do that, which is why it has been my view all along, and it's shared with the Economic and Workforce Development Committee, that one of the primary missions of the SA Ready to Work Advisory Board is to represent industry, represent those businesses that are employing, that have jobs available, that need workers, and that represent, frankly, the future of the San Antonio economy. That's how we built it, and I'm glad that there's already initial partnership with employment, with employers. If you're listening to this and you're not part of that mix, we need you. If you have jobs available, we want to get connected with you. But on the job training and making sure folks can get back to work as quickly as possible, but also gain skills, credentials in the process is a huge focus of our workforce development programs.
That's great. I think the on-the-job training is very critical because it should be the easiest way to get positions filled, right? And so that is something that business community, we're needing it badly. The next item I'm bringing up is the Access to Workforce Development Program. When this program first was being announced, immediately the small business community is thinking, this is for large business. This is the big corporations coming in saying, we need workers, train them for us, get them back there. And we need to make sure that the small business community is going to have access to that same program. And specifically, we want to make sure that there's a program that's incorporating training for the entrepreneurs to advance. When we look at poverty in our area of our serving area, when we look at our city, when we look at pockets of areas of poverty, we have to look at the small businesses in those areas and what do they need to advance, because they're hiring in those areas. And how do we give them what they need to continue growing? So the workforce development program, to me, and to a lot of business community, is identifying a way so that we don't lose our workers. We are able to send them to get trained to advance, so we get better workers and we're able to pay more, right? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, let me make this abundantly clear, and this is probably not for the folks watching right now, but for the rest of the community, which is that small businesses need skilled workforce just as much as large businesses do. And in fact, probably more so. I would also say that there is perhaps a greater opportunity to partner with on-the-job training with small businesses, provided that they provide credentials to their workers. So if there are jobs available for on-demand industries, sectors, regardless of the size of the employer, we want to work with you. We want to utilize our Ready to Work program. We want to utilize the Train for Jobs program that's currently underway, and connect our residents, our participants, with those job opportunities. Research shows that our emerging industries, which are medical, biotech, IT, logistics, construction, trades, and so many other fields, are emerging because of the growth of the small business community that supports them. It's not about the large businesses that create emerging industries. It's about what's happening underneath in the small business community. That's why they're targeted industries. That's why they're in-demand industries, and that's what's driving the training pipeline, the career fields that we're focusing to train people for. So I'm excited about the prospects of the Train for Jobs and Ready to Work program being able to connect workers with the small business community and ultimately allow the small business community to grow. I mean, you've said it, small businesses need capital, they need space, and they need workforce. And so we want to create that workforce. And I think these programs are a way to do that. Now we need employers, small businesses, employers, to connect with us. So because part of the intake process in that training program is to work with the participant to make sure that they're connected with a job at the end of the pipeline. That can be in a pipeline that's on the job, or it can be after the curriculum, but we want to make sure that we connect those job opportunities, because ultimately the goal of the training program is not just to create skilled workforce, but it's to get that skilled workforce employed in San Antonio.
That's amazing. I think you mentioned access to capital, right? Cash is king for small business, right? And what does that really mean? At the end of the day, it's a simple math calculation, right? It's what we're bringing in to what we're paying and what we're able to do with what we get to keep, right? And so one of the things that we need to always talk about is how the small business is at a disadvantage just by being a small business, right? When it comes to access to capital. Now, but before that, let's talk about, getting credit for inventory for small businesses. They're already paying higher rates because they can't buy in bulk. They're buying just what they need. And if they miss a payment, the rate is going up. So their cost is always higher, right? The same goes for health benefits. A lot of us want to offer health benefits, and the medical insurance for small businesses is from 50% up to 200% higher than a large group rate. This is a major issue, and it's extremely difficult to offer it when at the end of the day, it's no longer a benefit, it's a huge burden. right? And we need to find a solution to that. The other thing is that when a large business goes and asks for a bank loan, they will get their loan at a prime rate, and they will get that loan because it's a large loan. When a small business goes in for a loan, they never get the amount they ask for, they get less. They will get it at 3 to 5% above the prime rate because they're considered risky. So we pay higher rates for everything, right? And if the small business is denied, that banking relationship is ended. They're no longer going to go back, and the banking is not going to come back and reach them. They're basically saying they're too risky, we cannot do business with them. The only other option is to go through a CDFI to get those lending, right? But the lending through CDFI does not build a banking relationship for future banking. And it is also coming in above the prime rate, 3 to 5%. They're still in that risky business because CDFIs, they have to charge a rate because their rate's already coming in, charge that prime is going to go above. So we understand that that's the cycle we're in. But again, this is why small businesses stay small, right? It's very hard for a small business to invest back in their business to do stuff when they're having to pay increases for everything. And so one of the things right now is implementing any type of a wage increase or, you know, requiring benefits of anything is going to hurt the business community. We need to make sure that that is something we're aware of coming up front. And so I'm very curious to hear your thoughts as what you think with, you know, what we can do with access to capital.
Yeah, and it is a challenge, and I appreciate your comments, Julissa, on the challenges that small businesses face, even with the CDFI capital programs, and that is something that I think we need to be further aware of as we develop capital programs for small businesses. To understand the full extent of the challenge within the small business community, at the City of San Antonio Economic Development Department partnered with JP Chase recently to commission a report on the small business ecosystem. So it was called the San Antonio Small Business Ecosystem Assessment to really understand the challenges with capital. And there are some striking findings, and you're probably very well aware of them as you've been living through them for many years. The challenge on capital, available capital, is particularly acute for our local businesses owned by people of color. And that has been exacerbated by COVID-19 during the response and the recovery effort. The study found there's an overall historic unmet need of roughly $8.3 billion in capital for small businesses in San Antonio. That's across the board for all small businesses. But you're right, the disproportionately low rates of commercial bank lending are in Hispanic and Black neighborhoods on the South and then on the East sides in particular. So we have leaned on our philanthropic community to help subsidize some of the gap and do some micro lending and smaller loans. But we know that we need to see more activity within the actual commercial lending industry. And we do want to see further investments in CDFIs, which we've been partnering with during the recovery effort. But that's not going to be enough to just to narrow the funding gap. So we need to see our entire commercial lending institutions. You know, I'm very proud of some of our banking partners here in San Antonio, local partners, big banks that are trying to, you know, move the needle in this regard. And I think part of the effort to encourage that was to make these, make these facts available to really illustrate the problem. And so you're going to hear us talk a lot more about this as we get into the recovery fully, and really encourage and work with our banking industry to help with narrowing that gap. I'll also say that we're going to continue to invest in programs and partnerships like Lift Up and our loan interest buy down program, which are two examples of how we can address the capital gap. But it's huge, there's no doubt, and we've got to call attention to it and work with our lending institutions to help address it.
And I'm wondering, Mayor, if there's an opportunity that as the city is putting a $25,000 grant and the county is matching 25,000, that the local banks come in and say, we will do a 25,000 line of credit to attach to each of those loans, so that, again, the small business will come back with access to capital in a way that they're building that connection and relationship with those banks automatically. So that may be something that we can definitely talk about. I know I'd be happy to talk about that.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. In the stories of our local businesses that have really risen to national prominence, our local small minority-owned businesses that have become major players in manufacturing or name your sector, always have that story of a lending institution, a mainstream lending institution taking a chance. I have had many conversations over breakfast with Berto Guerra about his start and the relationship that he had to get his business started with Frost Bank. And those stories are all over the place. We need to make them more common here in San Antonio to really help our business community succeed, particularly in minority-owned businesses and Hispanic and Black businesses.
I agree. So I'm going to move on to one of the other things that has been established. So this is something that I'm actually really excited about. What I have admired is the way that you've wrapped yourself around experts, advisor groups that are helping you with all the different challenges the city is going through. And I think that that's something that is very impactful because it provides advice coming from the experts to be able to, the people, their boots on the ground, they're already working, they already know what's needed, and we just need to hear from them. And so I know that the city council recently approved a small business advisory board. Can you help explain what that board will be doing and how you will measure success for that board?
Yeah, well, in addition to our small business recovery efforts, City Council, as you mentioned, just created a 15-member advisory commission, Small Business Advisory Commission. It's called SBAC, not to be confused with the old SBAC, which now is the SBATA committee. So the new SBAC is a Small Business Advisory Commission whose mission is to review policies, upcoming policies, regulations, issues affecting the small business community, and make recommendations directly to the City Council and to myself to be able to have a 24/7 dialogue with the small business community. So there are no surprises, number one, but also we can talk through some of these issues in the context of policymaking for the city. The mission is to, again, review upcoming policies and regulations that affect small businesses and make sure that they can move the needle to ensure that the policies and recommendations that are coming out of the City Council are productive and help achieve success in the issues that we're talking about right now. We're trying to make sure that the commission itself is diverse and represents the mosaic of our small business owners, various sizes of businesses, small businesses representing targeted industries, professional and trade organizations, nonprofit small business service providers, et cetera. And that committee will have a direct link, like I said, 24/7, 365 with the Economic and Workforce Development Committee that is focused on these areas, the City Council Committee, EWDC. We're looking in particular to address issues of marginalized communities. I just mentioned those that are found within the capital, the availability of capital. And I'll say that currently the city is reviewing applications. We're expecting to start the process of assembling that committee on April 21st. And so, please, if you're interested, apply by April 21st. You'll get a priority review. I think the applications will remain open if we don't get enough by then. Also, I'll just mention again, I mentioned that it's called SBAC. That was what the SBATA committee used to be called. But the SBATA committee will continue on and will still have the same mission. It's just a different name. It's now SBATA, which makes it very clear what the two committees are doing. And just a spoiler alert, I've asked Julissa to be my appointee on this committee. So, there are council appointments available as well, but Julissa has done, and I know I'm talking to you, Julissa, but I'm really talking to the others that are watching this, that Julissa has done an incredible job for this community for so many years to advocate for small businesses. You were a co-chair of our economic transition team during the pandemic to help us, set the table for recovery. So I can't thank you enough for your advocacy, and there's not a better person to be on this committee, in my view, Julissa. So you represent the entire business community very well. But please do apply if you're interested. There's still slots available. April 21st is when the council will begin review.
I would like to say that the move of making sure we did not replace the Sabeta committee was very important. I think that was something, I know I was part of that Sabeta as well, right? But what I wanted to make sure was that did not go away. That needed to stay focused on what they do. But the creation of this advisory board came out of the economic transition team. I'm sorry, my train is passing. I need a quiet noise ordinance in this area. With that. So one of the things was establishing this advisory board, right? We wanted to make sure that we were going to be talking about small business growth all the time, not just during the pandemic. And I am so happy that this is coming, because there's, as you know, I have like a list of 20 things I want to make sure we're going to cover. A lot of the stuff we talked about today is going to be also discussed in this advisory board with other business owners, to make sure we're getting feedback and everything, to be able to provide feedback on the programs the city is going to be pushing out. And so I thank you for believing in this program, that it's very much needed. And now we have a place, right? The small businesses have the voice where they can formally come and ask and say, here's what's happening, here's where I need help, and immediately launch with some of those programs. So I'm happy for that. I know that we're getting close to our time. I want to just give you the floor of anything else that we haven't covered that you want to share to the small business community.
Yeah, well, thank you again, Julissa, for having this dialogue. I think it's critically important. I know stress level for everyone, but particularly our small business community, has been very high. And hopefully this provides a little bit of, insight and awareness of what we're doing to make sure there's supports for you. I just want to express my deep gratitude for everything that the small business community have done as business leaders, what you've done to support our community, to pivot on a dime several times during the course of this pandemic, to make sure that your employees and your customers and your businesses are safe. It's just been very inspiring to watch the resilience of our small business community. It's nothing short of miraculous how small business owners in our community have embodied the sense of service and sacrifice that is quintessential San Antonio, and how we're able to get through this pandemic ultimately. So thank you for that. I want to say that we're beginning to see the end, as we said before. The sun also rises, and I think the sun is rising in San Antonio. We're getting some economic momentum. We have the lowest positivity rate of any major metro in the state. That has been true for the last month. We're getting vaccines out. I mentioned we have now over 700,000 people who have had at least one shot in our community. And you may have heard me mention at the Alamo Dome, if you come after 2, you don't even need an appointment. You don't need to be of a certain eligibility group if you want a vaccine and don't have an appointment. Obviously, while supplies last, but you can come at 2 o'clock, between 2 and 5 at the Alamo Dome, and get one. So we're getting there, and you have my commitment to make sure that we're continuing to advocate for our small business community, that we continue to work with our federal and state partners and locally as well, to ensure that all resources are made available, that the technical assistance is available, and that as we get through this pandemic and ultimately we're back in a recovery mode and a rebuild, that these priorities of the small business community that were made clear during the pandemic don't fade away, are not off the agenda. In fact, they only become more important. So thank you for all that you are doing. Hang in there. We're here for you, and we're going to get through it together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor, and know that we love you. We love the support that you give us, and we know that we're not alone. We want you to know that you're not alone, that we're here to help you, and together we're going to get back on track. And my only regret is that we didn't do this session in Spanish as well, because I think that the conversations are important to get out to the Spanish speaking community as well. And I know the Hispanic community really needs to know that these programs are happening and that we're providing that support for them as well. I know that you are, I know the Maestro Center is, and Mari, I'm going to hand it back to you in case you want to add anything else, but thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this, and I know we're going to continue this dialogue going forward. So thank you, Mayor.
Absolutely. Thank you, Julissa.
This was an amazing conversation, and I'm just blown away about the discussion that we just had. And I'm really excited for what the future holds for our city, and more so for the business community. So stay tuned for all of the resources, because I know a lot of our other partners are also putting a lot of resources together, and the Maestro Center is also working really hard to put these resources and push them out to everyone, so everyone has access to them. So I just want to say thank you, Mayor. This was amazing, and thank you, Julissa. I really appreciate your time and the support you've been doing for the small business community. So thank you once again, and I can't wait for what this couple of months in the future holds for our city. So thank you so much.
Thank you all. Have a great day. Great weekend. Bye, Mari. Bye, Julissa.
Thank you. Bye-bye.